Have you ever had that experience where everything's going really well and then all of a sudden somebody says something to you or something happens and your emotions have gone from 0 to 100? If you've had that experience and you'd like to understand a little bit more about what's going on for you on a biological level when that happens and what you can do to calm that system down, stick around. I'm going to talk you through some of the science behind our emotions and what we can do to help ourselves when we do get emotionally overwhelmed. My name is Ruth Clare and I am an author and a speaker, and I'm also somebody who has complex PTSD and ADHD, and both of those things make me very prone to having a lot of emotions. And I've done a lot of therapy to help myself kind of understand emotionally why I might be feeling the way that I do at certain times. But it wasn't until I really understood about the role of our nervous systems in our emotions that I really found some practical strategies that helped me in that, you know, when your body is just, you can barely even hear and there's a lot of white noise going on. In those moments where you are likely to act in ways that you later regret, I used to carry a lot of shame about how reactive I could be. And understanding the biological aspect of why that response was so difficult to control has really helped me. So I hope the information that I'm going to share with you in this video is going to help you too, and help you to be a bit less hard on yourself if you do have very big emotional responses to things that other people might not even notice or have any reaction to. So the first thing you need to understand about the way our biology impacts our emotions is I'm going to show you something that is called the hand-brain model. And it's something that was created by a scientist called Dr. Siegel. And basically the idea is you use your hand as if it is a brain. And this represents your spinal column. This part of your brain here is the emotional or limbic part of your brain. Out here we have got something called the amygdala, and that generally sits in there interacting with that emotional part of your brain. And then over the top here we have got the thinking part of our brain. Now the thinking part of our brain is ideally where we will all be spending a lot of our time. That's where we can be logical and have a lot of forward thinking. We'll be thinking to ourselves, there are consequences. There are, if I say you're an a-hole to a person, they're not going to enjoy that very much. And so possibly, even if they are being a bit of an a-hole in that moment, possibly I shouldn't do it. Possibly that's not a wise choice. But what happens when in our brains, especially if we've had histories of trauma or if we have very sensitive nervous systems like with neurodivergence, is this part of our brain out here, the amygdala, its entire job is to scan our environments for threat. So it spends all of its time, this is all happening unconscious, it's part of our autonomic nervous system, which is operating 24 hours a day, making sure that we are breathing, making sure our hearts are beating, all of those things that we don't have to think about, and we ensure our survival. This is scanning for threats. Its entire job is to make sure that we are safe and that we survive, so that we can survive. But when we've had trauma, what can happen is, in a situation, I grew up in a home with a lot of family violence. So in my home, where I was meant to be safe, it was not safe. This thing was on all the time going, well, if my dad was in the house, I never knew it was going to set him off, so it wasn't safe. At no time was it safe. And so I spent a lot of my life in a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, because when the amygdala senses a threat, what it does is this thing that Dan Siegel has described as flipping your lid. So it throws off your thinking brain. It basically says, oh my God, I don't have time for forward planning. I have a survival threat here. There is a tiger attacking. I need to get out of here. So it's like, off you go, thinking brain. Now it sends a message down our spinal cord through our nervous system to all of our organs and muscles, and it says, so it pushes the fight, flight, freeze response. And what happens during the fight, flight, freeze response is your heart might increase. Your legs have a lot more blood flowing to them so that you can run away from tigers. Your breathing gets shallower, so there's more oxygen available for you to run away from threats. But in our modern society, what happens is we're not generally running away from the threats that we experience. The threats that we experience might be things like somebody says something nasty about you online. And so you could try running away. You could give it a crack, but I don't reckon it's going to be very effective. But your entire biology it's a very ancient system that we are operating. So I read a quote recently, I'm going to get it completely wrong, but it basically said that we've got this primitive operating system. We're trying to function in a society that is lost in the Middle Ages, and we're negotiating with technology that is more advanced than anything that we've ever been equipped biologically to handle. And what this means is that we have all this input coming to us all of the time, and our poor little amygdala is out there going, oh my God, that woman was mean. It's a threat. It's a threat to our survival. We're thrown out of the pack. Or somebody says something that reminds us of an experience in our past, and because our poor little biology isn't very good at distinguishing the past from the present from the future, it's like, that thing's happened again. That terrible thing that happened in the past is now happening in the future. So the big emotional responses that we get, the reason we become dysregulated is because our amygdala has pressed the button on our fight, flight, freeze response. And all of the things that we describe as emotions, you think about it. How do you know that you are having an emotion? The only way that you know that you are having an emotion is because there has been a change in your physiology. Sadness has certain sensations of dragging, these are all things, if you are feeling anxious, you generally feel your heart is beating stronger. If you're feeling angry, you definitely feel your heart beating stronger. That's my go-to, is generally more the anger side of things first, and then I descend into a lot of sadness. But it's all physiological. Emotions are all physiological. And we come up with all these stories that tell us why things have happened and how we can change them in the future. But if we have flipped our lids, the thinking brain that we're trying to use to help ourselves in those moments, that thinking brain is offline. And this is, I've done, I am now an old person. I am 50. I've done decades worth of therapy. I've studied it. I've looked at a lot of different modalities. I've tried most of the available things out there. And one of the things that I see as the biggest flaw in the system is that many therapy types try and use thought to help us manage our emotions when they're ignoring the fact that our emotions are being driven by our nervous systems, Our thinking brains are offline when our emotions are activated. And so we can do all that once we've calmed down, once the fight, flight, freeze response has left our body. That kind of thinking work is really, really helpful. But for me, I would prefer not to, when I've flipped my lid, to be acting the way that I'm acting. I would prefer not to accidentally call a person an a-hole, because I would prefer that my thoughts are online. So I want to take you through some of the practices that I use. Firstly, you have to become aware. You have to become aware that your flight, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to say this, am I? Your fight, flight, freeze, fawn response has been activated. And how do you become aware of that? Because you pay attention to that there has been a change in your body. If there has been a change in your body, instead of start describing the emotion, doing the thinking, just pay attention to the fact that there has been a change in your body. That's the first thing. Spend a little bit of time connecting with where you're experiencing those things inside your body. Because the way that you regulate your fight, flight, oh my God, it's going to, whatever, the response is through your body. You have to become more adept at tuning into and connecting with your body as a first port of call, so that when you know that you have been activated, you know, even though your thinking brain has been flipped offline, the one thing you can do is say to yourself, now is not a time to act. Do not press send on that email. Write the email. Absolutely. Do not send the email. If you are feeling those physiological changes in your body, you need to calm that down first and foremost. The way you do this is, number one, and I know you've heard it before, I bet somebody out there is predicting what I'm going to say, it is your breath. It is your breath. Now, why is the breath important? The breath is important because in the same way that this amygdala scans your external environment for cues of danger, it also scans your internal environment. So if you can make a conscious decision to alter your internal environment, it starts to read your internal system going, oh, we don't seem to be having that small panting breath. Maybe the risk isn't as serious as I first thought it was. So if you change your breath, you are giving feedback to your autonomic nervous system, it's okay, we can slow down, the threat isn't real, we're all good. So breathing. Now there's a very specific breath that people use called the box breath. And the box breath is something that they use even in the military during times of battle, when you are guaranteed to not have a thinking brain strongly online if you are facing through assault. I'm the child of a veteran, so I'm always interested to understand more about the trauma of that world. You know, my dad's behavior toward me was related to his own trauma and his very, very strongly unregulated fight, flight, freeze response, which is another reason that I'm very interested in this subject. Breathing in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. And that box breath, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. It does a number of things. Firstly, the fact that you are thinking about breathing and adding an algorithmic structure to your breathing is helpful to getting this part of your brain down and engaged again. Secondly, that hold for 4 at the end is the key part of this breath, because I do public speaking and I always get anxious beforehand, and when you are really anxious, it's really hard to get breath in. It is really hard to get breath in, and that is because you are in a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. So holding for 4 at the end of a breath is the thing that says to your body, oh, we're not panting anymore, we're okay. So learning to kind of extend that pause at the end is the most important part. So in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. That's the box breath. That's number 1. The second thing you can do when you have been emotionally triggered is to pay attention to the world through your senses. Because what we do wrong, well, not wrong, something that isn't helpful to our process of moving past our emotions more quickly is that we have this habit of immediately going into a thinking response. So instead of using our energy, this fight, flight, freeze response in our energy, what am I saying? Instead of using the fight, flight, freeze response, the energy that has been released from that to run away or punch someone, well, hopefully do not punch people. That is not my advice. Do not punch people. Okay, that is not good. We instead immediately go into overthinking. There is a study that has shown that it actually takes 90 seconds for all of the chemicals of an emotion to be released from your body. Now, if you're like me, the idea that your emotions last 90 seconds, you think, well, that is wishful thinking. And it's true, I've had emotions that have lasted far longer than 90 seconds. But the way that it actually works, and this makes sense to me, and I'd be really interested if this makes sense to you too, is that if we're able to just tune into our bodily responses and concentrate on breathing and trying to calm ourselves down, we can regulate our nervous system, come back to a feeling of safety, and the emotion will pass. But what we do is we feel the emotion, we go, oh my God, I'm feeling an emotion. Either we say, he's a terrible person, or what's wrong with me, or this is bad, and we start telling ourselves all of these stories. If we were able to just experience the sensations in our body and to focus on our breath and on reminding ourselves that we're safe and that we're not coming to any harm in this moment, the emotion would pass relatively quickly. But because we either start thinking everything that's wrong with that person. Every time we have a picture in our head, we add a picture to our head that says, he's a jerk because of this. And then we start thinking, yeah, jerk did that as well. Jerk did that. Oh my God, all of the jerk. And then we think of every jerk that has ever jerked a jerk in the world. All that does is give our poor little primitive brains more images that they think are real. They are not good at distinguishing real or imagined. So past, that's happening now. This is jerk is a jerk, and a jerk's being a jerk now. He's not being a jerk now. We're telling stories to our brain that makes it believe that the jerk is happening, and every time we do, we flip the lid. So the emotion stays, the emotion stays, the emotion stays. If instead of this, we can focus on only being present in the moment through paying attention to the world through our senses, through noticing something we're hearing, something we're smelling, something we're tasting, something we're touching. Can't remember if I did all of them. Something we're hearing, whatever one I haven't done, fill in the blank. If we can do that instead, it's like once that lid is flipped, we are not an official human being who knows how to drive cars. We are an animal. We are back to animal self. So we have to treat ourselves like a little frightened beast that needs a bit of calming. We've got to be kind to ourselves in that moment and calm our little selves down. Before we start telling ourselves stories about why we shouldn't feel the way we're feeling, let's calm our little selves down. Let's say, okay, right now, you're safe. Nothing to be scared of. I know you got a little fright of some sort, something got triggered in you, but let's pay attention to this moment. And in this moment, it's all good. And when your brain starts to say, but this story, but this jerk, but you just say, I'm not going to, at the moment, that is not helpful. What I need to do now is breathe, come back to the present moment and experience the world through my senses. And in this moment, I am safe. And every time those thoughts come up, you put them to the side and say, I'm going to think about those once my thinking brain's online. Because if my thinking brain is not online, all that's doing is triggering more fight, flight, freeze response. So you put it to the side and say, I hear your concerns, little brain. I'm not thinking, I'm just coming to the present moment. And that's the whole purpose of all the mindfulness stuff, right? That's the whole purpose of all the meditating and whatever, is to recognize when your thinking is running away with you, coming back, observing it, and choosing instead to be present in the moment so that you can be calm. Then you can make an actual conscious choice about whether or not it's worth your energy, because we spend a lot of energy, waste a lot of energy trying to justify why we're feeling the way we're feeling, trying to blame people and think about the things. Why do we feel this way? If we could spend a bit more time just trying to actually come back into our bodies. One of the ways that I find really helpful to do this as well is to pay attention to your edges, to notice your feet, how they're interacting with the floor or with your shoes or inside your socks, really noticing those textures, and try and bring your breath right down to those toes. Really bring that breath right down there, imagining, because the deeper the breath, the calmer the feel, the more you can hold it, the more you can relax, the more you can let those emotions pass without getting involved in all the thinking about it. It's not all the thinking, it's a feeling thing. You want it to pass more quickly, you've got to feel it. You've got to feel it. And I know we're a society that runs away from the feeling, but trust me, I have analysed myself to death. You've got to be able to come back into your body and remind yourself that in this moment you are safe, and you don't have to keep compounding the misery of an already uncomfortable feeling by stirring up all the stories. Just try and calm yourself down first, and then you can decide if it's worth it. So bringing your attention to your feet, feeling your bottom on a chair. And if you have had a big feeling that has come up for you, so sometimes I get really activated and you can try and calm yourself down, but sometimes what you need to do first, and again, I recommend taking yourself away from people doing this, but actually doing some like punching or some star jumps or something, just to kind of remind yourself that it is energy. It is not a judgment on you that you're feeling a feeling. We all feel feelings. It's totally fine that we feel feelings. Society's got a really weird concept about us always meant to be feeling happy. No. Especially if you've had trauma, especially if you have got a highly sensitive nervous system, lots of things come in at you, right? You get an overwhelmed sensation. If we could just be a bit calmer about the fact that, yes, people feel feelings and know what to do to support ourselves as we feel them, then I think things would be a lot better. That's just my personal opinion. So experiencing those sensations in your body, noticing if you feel too agitated to just do a bit of if the idea of doing some breathing just makes you want to throw something, that's a sign that you might need to discharge some energy. So don't ignore it. Don't judge yourself for it, but don't keep telling yourself the stories is going to keep you trapped there. Just go, okay, too much energy in my system. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. Fight or flight. Do some exercise. If you can, just do some jumping on the spot, do some, punch in the air, really mean it. You know, picture it and go and understand that you're trying to process some energy so that you can get this back online. And understand that that is an important precursor toward any of the thinking. So for me, understanding that role of the nervous system has just helped me to be less judgmental. Like you, we are animals. And even though we spend our lives doing amazing, crazy things like video recording ourselves and sharing it with strangers, it's like the sci-fi of the future. Like, our biology has not caught up with that. Our biology is not there. That future world that, you know, we can, you know, the front part of our thinking brain can conceptualize and we can navigate. That's all well and good, but that's not the only part of our brains and biology that is in operation here. We are animals, and we need to come back to understanding our own biology and to stop making every kind of biological part of our functioning, which emotions are, they're a biological part of our functioning that initially served a purpose, but we just try and eradicate them. We just try and have no emotions apart from happy. And it's a way more self-compassionate viewpoint from my perspective if you can, instead of trying to just not feel things, to know how to support yourself when you feel things, and to have compassion for the fact that if you are somebody who gets easily overwhelmed by your feelings, there is probably a reason for that. And there are things you can do to support yourself that are actually quite simple and practical. I always recommend people get help from a therapist, but it's not always possible for people to do that. So there are some simple practical things that you can do to support yourself. And these body-based practices are something that I return to time and time again. And do I get them perfect? Absolutely not. Do I sometimes call people a-holes? It's been known to happen. But I really, really, really try not to. And mostly I only do it like on my phone, not to real people, because that's just, you know, that's a life goal. Stop calling people a-holes to their face. If you're going to do it furtively behind their back like a normal person. Like, that's like a life goal. I think that's an achievable life goal. I think that's something that I can kind of get behind. So yeah, I hope that has been helpful to you. And if there are any other things that I can help you with that you might have questions about related to your emotions, emotions are my absolute jam. I can talk about those boys for years. So comment anything that you have questions about, private message me, or whatever we do on this futuristic world we live in, and I will create some content about the stuff you're interested in. Thanks.